hear me all, since I can see my avatar pulsate. There is some dispute about whether atheism is actually a religion. I remember atheists saying atheism is just a lack of a belief in God, and therefore not a religious or a political system. But I would say that implicit in the idea of atheism is that it is more moral to be atheist than it is to be religious. And that is really the most important thing to understand about atheism, even though atheists would deny that atheism is actually a formal religious system, but implicit in the idea that atheism is not a religion is the idea that it is. So atheists would say that atheism is a superior it is a superior belief and moral system to believing in God and the afterlife. And this is because they would no doubt argue, these atheists would no doubt argue, that atheism has killed fewer people than the religious wars that we have all heard so much about, the European wars of religion. I guess those people who called the wars of the Reformation the European wars of religion have shot themselves in the foot, I suppose. But the important thing to understand is that atheists would be very offended if you told them that they had no morals, because they would say, I don't need to believe in God and the afterlife and silly stories to know that murder and theft and rape are wrong. So, at the very least, their claim is that they are morally superior to these religious people who kill each other at the drop of a hat over some doctrinal disagreement many centuries ago that they can no longer remember. But is atheism in fact superior to believing in God? I would argue no, because whoever heard of an ancient civilization of atheists? What is the most ancient civilization? I suppose it would be China. But China has changed its religion over the centuries. So it would be very hard to say conclusively that atheism is. Is it or not? Sorry, let me start again. We need to understand the purpose and nature of these belief systems. So atheists, in thinking that they are superior to religious people, will say that they are superior in that liberals are currently top dog in the world because of the global Western empire. And they're in fact saying might is right, and therefore all our ancestors who believed in Christianity, they were terrible people. They were terrible people in that they fought the European wars of religion, and we don't want to do this sort of thing. But who's to say that atheists could not would not kill people because, just because they thought they could get away with it, and atheists would think they would get away with all kinds of evil because they don't think God exists to punish them for anything. So as regards the running time of secular political ideologies of which we are aware, that would be the laïcité of France, the communism of China. You can't talk about the communism of the Soviet Union because it's crashed and burned, but China is still, officially anyway, communist. But it hasn't really got much of a track record. See, all these things go a little wrong. Yes, I am. Stay in the call. I will stay in the call. I'm looking at the wrong window, obviously. So China would, I think it's the 80th year of the Chinese Communist Party, so not much of a track record. How long has liberalism been going on? When did liberalism really begin? I would say that it began in the French Revolution, because even though the Americans were the first to declare themselves a republic away from Christendom, the French were in fact the first European republic to say our official religion is not Christianity, it's not Catholicism, it is whatever our leaders say is wise for the country. And this is fundamentally what all the secular political ideologies are claiming, that their system, their political system that enables atheist politicians is in fact superior to Sharia and Christianity, with a king supported by its priesthood. And I would argue that it doesn't make sense, since Christianity, that was meant to defend the divine right of Constantine the Great and other and subsequent Roman emperors, crashed and burnt. But this did not prevent the Europeans from accepting Christianity as a religion, because I guess there was nothing else around, and the barbarian kings of Europe, who were really only warlords, felt that they needed to be morally validated by some superior form of government, and they thought that the Roman Catholic Church was an ancient imperial institution that they, as barbarian kings, should submit to. Like, they actually had their own form of Celtic Christianity, but they felt it wasn't, quite glamorous or grandly European and imperial enough, and so they submitted to the Pope for quite a while until they couldn't stand it anymore. So, as you can see, even these religions have, they need to be periodized, I suppose. So with regard to Christianity, you could date the beginning of Christianity to the Council of Nicaea from the year 325, and then you can date the time of Trinitarianism from the year 380, when the Edict of Thessalonica was passed by the Emperor Theodosius in the year 380, and then from that time on, anyone who called himself Christian had to be Trinitarian. until the Socinian controversy, which was basically Christians in Poland denying the Trinity and being persecuted by the Pope. So we have to go, actually I don't remember when the Socinian controversy was, but never mind. It was certainly before the American Revolution in 1776. And the Founding Fathers were the first people to reject the institution of monarchy as a whole, because it was understood by them that monarchy was tyranny, and tyranny supported by the church, and that was why the Founding Fathers separated the church from their state, because if they did not, it was felt that a monarchy would somehow sneak in and prevent what they hoped to be a meritocracy from ever succeeding, because obviously monarchy is the antithesis of meritocracy. A meritocracy is a society that only rewards the meritorious, and there is no guarantee that the king's son, however good the king is currently, will be able to match the wisdom of his father. And we know this is true from the story of King Solomon and his son, whose name I cannot ever remember, who split the ancient kingdom of Israel into two. And then, after the wars of the Reformation settled down a bit, when most of Europe were no longer under the Pope, or were sort of in half under the Pope or not. Anyway, it's a murky history, but what we can certainly agree on, I think, is that the Catholic Church was always losing power, because basically the Pope did not, in fact, have an army. And we know from the wars of unification in Italy, the Italian War of Unification, how much the Italians hated the Pope and basically confined him to the Vatican, because they had defeated the Pope as regards the defence of the Papal States, and the Pope could not get anyone, it would be Austria or Spain, I think, to defend him against the Italian nationalists. So if we look at the Catholic Church, we will find that it is really, it has a very strong established track record of losing power, until it now only submits to the liberal order. And now many Westerners feel that the liberal order is not serving them at all well, so it has to be changed. But I think really the problem of liberalism is a lot of things haven't been formally announced. So we have all these questions about, is liberalism really a religion? Is atheism really a religion? Well, it's certainly a belief system, right? And why would any belief system be considered better than another? The universal answer to this question would be, if it's true, then it is better than having an untrue belief system. How do we know if anything is true? It can be proven or unproven. Obviously, it's not possible to prove the existence of the afterlife to people still alive. So it is actually quite easy to deny the existence of God, because we can say, under the rules of empiricism, we see no existence of God, we see no evidence of good being rewarded or evil being punished. And so we disbelieve, because if we give up all kinds of opportunities to do all kinds of fun things while we're still alive, we will forever have deprived ourselves of the opportunity of having all kinds of sex with all kinds of people, and having the pleasures of drink and intoxication. So, as far as the atheist is concerned, there is a real price to be paid for obeying the prohibitions of the Abrahamic God. But how is morality to be measured? And I'm saying it is, again, uncontroversial if you say that the efficacy of any moral system can be judged by the status and duration of the group. And now we come to the Jews, who have been around longer than Christians, and Christians are the most powerful religious group in the world. So really it is the Jews who are the key to the mystery that is God, I would say. Hello, IC3 and Skyworks. I hope I've been reasonably coherent so far in what I've been saying about atheism and atheists thinking that their belief system is superior to that of those who believe in God, because they have more fun and they have more power so far, because the liberal order, which is fundamentally atheist, is still the most powerful political system in the world. Everybody is still nominally democratic and having elections. And then I went on to say that the Jews have been around for longer, and these Christians who can't quite make up their minds whether they are actually Christian or actually liberal are always complaining about the Jews anyway. So it is, I think, because Jews have been around longer than they have, that, whether they like it or not, Christians have to acknowledge that Jews have been around for longer, and also that they have that they owe their religion to Jews, because without and in fact Judaism, because without Judaism there will be no Jews, without Jews there will be no Jesus for Christians to worship, and the whole basis of Christianity is the worship of a Jew called Jesus. Why is this important? It's important because it's all to do with the Abrahamic God. The Abrahamic God is supposed to have revealed the Torah to Jews, and Christians believe that Jesus is God. And Muslims claim to be the correction to all the wrong think of Christians, who keep insisting that Jesus is God, even though Jews don't agree with them. So the Quran is a correction saying that, look, he's obviously not God. It's absurd of you to think that God had sex with the mother of Jesus, who miraculously remained a virgin, and he's obviously not God. He can't be God conceptually. He cannot conceptually be God because of Deuteronomy chapter 13. And if you're saying that Jesus is God, then you are saying Jesus created the universe. And if you're saying that, I mean, can't you see how absurd this all is? And if you keep insisting and arguing that, it's not, if God really is omnipotent, he would be able to enter his own universe as Jesus. But then why would he? This is the thing about morality. We have lots of things we could in theory be doing that could be mad and silly, and it is only through our sense of what is appropriate, through the morals we have been taught and hold, that we restrain ourselves from killing, stealing, raping, etc. So whatever God is in theory capable of doing, for example being mad and silly, he isn't, because he's supposed to be, well, truth and logic and perfect and perfect morality. So he wouldn't want to, well, he wouldn't lie to you. I mean, that's a whole idea, right? He would not contradict himself and say, don't worship anything that isn't me, and then say, oh, go and worship my son. It's just patently absurd. And Christians, for some reason, can't see that or won't see that. And that's the most frustrating thing of all. We all speak English. I think I'm expressing myself in clear grammatical English. I think you all know what I'm saying. You just don't like it, and that's why you keep pushing out all the truth and logic that I have been trying to drip feed into you, because you just don't want to acknowledge that you have been the victim of a divine practical joke. So you can ask, well, but why did God allow Christians to be so successful and acquire 3 global empires if he didn't approve of them? And I'm saying to them, well, you don't really know what he plans for you. But of course I'm saying that I do, right? I'm saying God allows Christians to do what they will and then suffer what they must because of their disobedience. And then he helpfully sends Muslims and the Quran to tell these Christians how they can best correct themselves with Sharia. And it's even, quite a fair bargain. Nobody's forcing you to become Muslim. You just have to adopt Sharia for non-Muslims, and you will be given time to decide whether you actually want to recite the Shahada or stay in a group calling themselves agnostic or atheist. There's always the option, because secular Quranism uncompromisingly supports the First Amendment, and that must mean you will suffer no discrimination by not calling yourself Muslim. Good, thank you for your comments. So Skyworks will predictably say atheism is not really a religion, because a religion is basically a belief system plus a value system plus a rule system. And but I've already explained to you that the fact that you acknowledge yourself to be atheist is to say that, atheists are smarter than people who believe in God. So you are assuming a kind of superiority by calling yourself atheist. IC3 helpfully asks, is length of existence a measure of morality? And I'm saying yes, because if you agree with me that morality is a system of rules designed to keep the group in existence and apart from others, then you'd have to acknowledge that Judaism, as a system of rules designed to keep them in existence and apart from others, has managed to do that so far, even if they're not terribly popular at the moment, and they're also confused and angry and self-hating. So, but there can be no argument at all about Jews being the most ancient and powerful tribe in the world, right? Because even the Christians complain about them, and the complaint is basically that they are the eternal victims of Jews who always cause Christians to suffer all kinds of unspecified what's the word? Well, okay, let me put it this way. Christians claim that Jews are guilty of doing all kinds of nefarious things to them, but they're not really able to specify exactly what it is, other than they seem to be privileged, right? They think Jews are more privileged than Gentiles, and they have somehow cleverly got their government to make them privileged Jews. But even this complaint about Jews being more privileged is in a way conferred on Jews by anti-Semites, because by claiming to be the eternal victims of Jews, you're saying Jews are in a higher status than yourself, because they're always able to perpetrate unspecified crimes that result in your eternal victimhood. So you can see that in a situation of a criminal and a victim, that the criminal actually has a higher status than the victim until and unless the criminal is brought to justice. So the complaint by the Gentile anti-Semite is that Jews always have one over them, and are guilty of all kinds of unspecified bad behaviour that has resulted in the suffering of the Gentile. Skyworks, why you ask me length of existence? I mean, what's so hard to understand about Jews having been around for longer than Christians, or that Christians have been around longer than Muslims? Isn't it obvious? I don't know about Jews having the moral high ground. I have called Jews the aristocracy of humanity, merely because they have a more restrictive religion, and it's always the case that anyone claiming to be the aristocracy have to claim to be to have higher standards of morals than the hoi polloi. So the Jews obviously do that. Their religion is obviously more restrictive, and so we have to accept that even if they don't do what they're supposed to do, they are still the aristocracy of humanity, because they have a more restrictive religion, expecting higher standards of them. So the next thing you'll say is, but they don't follow them. And I would agree, they don't follow their religion, and half of them, if not more, are not following the halakha. They're not even observant. Liberal, secular, assimilated Jews, and are hated because a lot of Gentiles consider their privilege to be unearned and unfair on them. So, what is to be done? And I'm saying Sharia for non-Muslims would protect Jews and Gentiles from each other and actually allow Jews to maintain their traditions, if that is what they wish to do, and for anyone who's a social conservative to maintain the human practice of marriage, because really that's what distinguishes humanity from non-human animals, right? I mean, this is a clear blue water. We know that the animal kingdom does not conduct wedding ceremonies. They might have long-term partnerships, but they certainly do not have the marriage ceremony. Only we are capable of thinking up things like that. And I'm saying marriage is eugenic, and that's a reason why any self-respecting religion would support marriage as a practice, and their government privilege married parents to encourage the people of that country to become responsible married parents in order to keep the group in existence and apart from others. So I hope this is reasonably clear. I will now finish. I'll end the stream because I think I've come to an appropriate time to end the stream, but I see Skyworks is objecting to Sharia. In all probability, I'm just willing to bet, Skyworks, that you're not a married father, so and you, of course you're an atheist. You've made that very clear. So, of course, no one wants to have their sexual liberation limited by Sharia, but I'm saying you need to regulate human behaviour to have some semblance of a civilization. And that's why you have laws, forbidding murder and theft and rape and insisting that you cannot have children without a marriage license, all these ideas. And if you don't obey these rules, bad stuff is going to happen to your society, and you're going to blame the Jews, right? You're going to blame the Jews again, even though you can't follow your own rules, and obviously the Jews will try to follow theirs, and basically you hate them because they embody bourgeois values. They respect the institutions of marriage and the family, and that's why they do well. And I was talking to an Islamophobe earlier today, and he was complaining about the nepotism of the Indians, from India in America, the ones brought in by the H-1B visas, and I think, what do you expect? If you have respected the institutions of marriage and the family, you're gonna avail yourself of the advantages of being part of a group who will protect you, and you will also have to benefit them by giving them jobs that you could have given to someone else, and this is how things used to work. So nepotism, I guess, is an unintended consequence of patriarchy. But then if you make sure that your society is a meritocracy, and you create institutions that only employ people on merit, then you should be okay, right? I mean, even family firms have to hire, outside talent. So there are ways of getting around that problem, but just as long as you understand what the problem is and why these, immigrants fresh off the boat do so much better than the indigenous who've been here for centuries. It's because they are equipped with the institutions of marriage and the family that they respect more than you do, which you refuse to practice because your cultural practice is to blame the Jews. And it doesn't really help, does it? To blame the Jews and complain about the Muslims when, in fact, you are part of the problem. You are part of the problem because most of you are confirmed bachelors and would basically rather die than marry a woman of your own race. So by refusing to accept that some things have to change, by rejecting Sharia out of hand, you remain a part of the problem. I'm sorry to say, Skyworks. So his next comment is quite an interesting question. What is your definition of an Islamophobe? An Islamophobe is a Westerner. Okay, he can be from another country outside the West. An Islamophobe is someone who complains about his government and identifies as conservative, but refuses to accept my recommendation that they start respecting the institutions of marriage and the family, and the only way of doing that is to shame sluts and slut fuckers and treat unmarried parents as sex offenders. There's just no way. There's just no way around that. I'm not proposing to force people into marriage. There will be no forced marriage, but there will be social pressure to do so. Obviously, married parents will be privileged over non-parents. Non-parents will be people who are single but marriageable, or they could be gay and unmarriageable, or they could be straight and unmarriageable. But the point is, non-parents will be lower in status to married parents. And if you become a parent without marrying, then you'll be a sex offender. I think you can already see the eugenic agenda behind what I'm proposing, and I guess you don't want to follow this recommendation because possibly you are yourself illegitimate, or you have sired or given birth to illegitimate offspring, and or even if neither applies to you, you don't want to offend your friendship and family circle who will suffer from one or two of the disadvantages that I mentioned, which is to be an unmarried parent or to be illegitimate. And obviously this is very degenerate. You are in fact causing the next generation to be inferior to the previous generation and not correcting yourself, and that is obviously the source of all your problems, which you prefer to blame on Jews. So, an Islamophobe is someone who refuses to accept my recommendation of secular Quranism, even when I am not asking them to change their religion. I am inviting them to consider the eugenic practice of marriage and how it is the building blocks of family, and because you don't want to do it, you will keep rejecting it because I guess you know you can. I have no power to make anyone do anything. Insofar as I have any power, it is in expressing myself clearly, and to make logical propositions that are restricted by morality, and that's all I can do. And if it is your purpose to reject anything you dislike, even if it is logical and moral, there's really not an awful lot I can do about it, right? And maybe you don't want me to do anything about it, and you don't want to do anything about it, and you just want to go to your grave uncorrected and unrepentant and think you've gotten away with it. But I'm saying, under my system, you will, people will understand what the problem is, and they will know who is most helping solve the problem and who is most not helping and who is most part of the problem. So why is atheism inferior? It's inferior because if you're atheist, you're just less likely to forego opportunities to have sex, and you will be easier to bribe and threaten because you don't believe in the afterlife. You don't believe in making any sacrifice for any principle, because you would regard any loss of status, loss of property, loss of employment as something that you just couldn't bear to put up with. So you will never make the sacrifice because you don't believe that you will be rewarded. So that is why belief in the afterlife is crucial to incentivizing correct behavior, and by extension you would have to believe in God, because it wouldn't be logical to believe that good will be rewarded and evil punished if you did not believe God exists to do these things. Thank you for your